Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to bring Tory McCagg to our Zoom author events. I'm Heidi, and I'll be your host tonight. I am the co-owner of Capital Books in downtown Sacramento. As I mentioned, I've been really looking forward to this event, not only because it's an unusual setting and we've never done anything like this before, but because I keep toying with the idea of wanting to raise chickens myself. And so I'm interested to hear what Tory has to say about her journey and how she got started in not only raising a couple chickens, but now she's got more, and they're doing even more to sustainably live in their environment. So we're going to start off with Tory's going to talk a little bit about her book, and she's going to read a couple passages from it. And then her husband, Carl, is going to join us and ask Tory some questions. And feel free, if you guys have any questions, you can either raise your hand and I'll turn your mic off, and you can ask them of Tory herself, or if you're shy that way, you can type your questions out. So welcome, Tory.
Thank you so much, Heidi. It's great to be here in the coop. So yeah, should I just plunge in?
Yeah, plunge in and talk about what made you want to write the book, and how, you had said that you started out just wanting to feel like the food that you were eating was coming from happy animals. And I'm a lot of us are trying to live that way too. You see a lot of signs in the supermarket now that it's either free range chickens or cage free, and I'm not sure that even a lot of people know the difference there.
Right.
So I'm curious how you got interested in writing about this.
Okay. Well, first of all, the book is called Crossroads with Chickens, a What If It Works adventure in off-grid living and quest for home. And about, was it 20 years into our marriage? 15 years into our marriage, Carl and I had been doing a little bit of gardening here and there, but we had also been talking about, Carl's from New Hampshire, so we wanted to build a little place off-grid. And we bought some property, and we went through all of the, and that's sort of what this is about. In 2010, we sort of downsized. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it all evolved, but it was a blog, and then I took the blog, this was after we moved up here in 2012, I started blogging, and just about our daily day-to-day life, what's going on, lives of the chickens, and that I used to turn into this book. Mm-hmm. And so that's how the book was formed. And yeah, and it's just sort of about a lot of different, sort of 4 or 5 different themes. I'm going to sort of start going to my notes now and sort of plunge into reading for about half an hour maybe, and then we can sort of talk about questions. So first of all, Heidi, thank you for having me at Capital Books on K. Originally, this was going to be we were going to do a cross-country tour and drive around and go to different bookstores, but of course that changed. Yeah. And so I thought, well, we're all cooped up, let's do this from the chicken coop. So that's how we ended up here. Being online means that people such as my sister and mother and my husband can go to all the readings, and so rather than have them be bored, I've been sort of following different themes. And one of them was introducing the characters, Carl and me and the chickens, and the place, Darwin's View, which is what we've called our home. Sustainability, we have I think you can see them in the background, the solar panels, and what we've learned living off-grid, and how important it is that we support local independent bookstores, as well as our farmers and sustaining our farms. Chickens, of course, our theme. Mother Nature, do we steward her or control her? And of course, given the pandemic and the debacle, horrible things that are happening about climate change and the weather and fires on the West Coast, I think she's giving us a hint
Yeah.
But today I thought I'd be at the beginning. I'm going to start at the beginning at the first chapter, which is called Roots, or the introduction. And these first pages, as first pages sometimes do, lay out the theme that I'm going to follow today, which is my quest for home. So, in 1966-67, when I was 4, my family lived in Hungary for a year. During that time, my father, an East European historian, researched his book, Jewish Nobles and Geniuses. While he sequestered himself in the Jewish archives, my artist mother painted, met other artists, and took care of my sister Zanda and me. My parents' social life revolved around an avant-garde intellectual circle that was watched by the communist regime. The only conscious memory of that time that I have is getting onto a crowded bus with Zanda and a babushka. Or maybe, like most of my childhood memories, that's just a photograph. Other photos of that time include my parents sitting with their friends, Miklos and Juji Erde, in their kitchen, smoking cigarettes and discussing the artistic and political happenings of the day. The Erde's teenage sons, Donnie and Yuri, standing outside the gate of their enclosed garden of their decaying home. And my sister and me playing with a pile of dachshund puppies. I wonder, at such a young age, did I take in that country's fear, its history of repression and terror, a sense of being watched, overseen, and judged? But wait, those photos might be of a later time, return trips. And does it matter how old I was, 4 or 7, when my parents took me to the countryside, or even if we were in Hungary? In my mind's eye, my parents and I stand under a grape arbor at a country villa surrounded by switchback paths and fields. The memory doesn't include my sister. 2.5 years older, Zanda had perhaps stayed with friends. There was a girl there, though, slightly older than I. I see her in a light cotton dress, long-limbed and slender, with black braids past her shoulders. She was going for a walk to a lake for a swim and to pick beautiful blue flowers. Did I want to come? I wasn't entirely convinced, uneasy perhaps in the strangeness of the country, the foreignness of the language. My parents, though, encouraged me, likely as not baffled by my limited curiosity. I went. The girl and I walked along those switchback paths and on into the unfamiliar. It seemed a terribly long way to that beautiful lake. We'll be there soon, the girl promised me in stilted English, over and over again. I squinted to see in the blinding sunlight. My clothes stuck to my skin. The heat suffocated any sounds as every step increased the distance between me and safety, my parents and home. I was very far from our home in East Lansing, Michigan. Why was I not there, curled up on a couch and reading the story of Dr. Dolittle to my cats, Foggy and Bathsheba? Instead, I followed a scorching path with trammeled yellow grass behind a strange girl who walked and promised a lake of cool water. Where was it? Did it exist? I got scared, remembering the stories of the gypsies kidnapping children, breaking their legs and leaving them to beg in the streets. Maybe this girl taking me so far away was a gypsy. Were we really going to a lake? I doubted it. I wanted to go back. The girl looked at me. I'm going to the lake to swim and pick blue flowers. She continued on. I turned back. The road looked different. The switchback lanes rising up to my right and down to my left shimmered with heat. I hesitated, but the girl was gone, and so I walked alone. I was lost and weeping when an old peasant, who to my eye looked remarkably like a gypsy with his grizzled beard and dirt-covered clothes, came up with his pony and cart. He spoke no English, but even if he had, I wouldn't have known what to say, where I was, or where I needed to go. Somehow he knew. Maybe he had seen
Uh-oh. Did Tory freeze up?
influences of the past. Why begin with this anecdote? Full to save me. So in 2010, our home, Carl's and my home, was in Providence, Rhode Island. We lived in a Victorian house that I adored. Carl, a trombonist, was on the road. We had begun thinking of downsizing. It would be a 2-for-1 deal. We'd sell the Victorian and with that money move into a smaller house and build an off-grid house in New Hampshire on some property we had bought in 2006. We found a house in the Edgewood section of Providence. It was a very cool house. So it was a stone house, and it was near Roger Williams Park across the street. Friends of ours lived a block away. Sure, it was in Edgewood where Providence meets Cranston, thus not at all walking distance to our favorite grocery store and restaurants. But we loved the house. Those big windows that looked north, not south, thus no passive solar heat. Lots of big, expensive windows leaking fossil fuel heat. The house was not 21st century type, but mid-20th century wallowing in cheap oil space. It had a big yard that I would get rid of, a big lawn that I would get rid of in favor of raised garden beds. The basement was huge and high ceilinged, the perfect man cave. Although I had said to Carl I had only one more house in me to renovate, and that one would have to be in New Hampshire, this one was special. We made an offer, the sellers accepted, we had ourselves a deal. And a house with a brand new roof that had to be replaced within a year of purchase due to leaks, plural, and floors with a bizarre tilt because the entire foundation had sunk when the house was built in the 1950s. We had hired 3 engineers to confirm the stability of the structure prior to buying. All of them assured us that any settling had happened years before. That funky house had a 50s style wet bar and vitrolite tiles in the bathrooms and kitchen that didn't line up due to the fallen foundation. Not a problem. We would end up removing all those tiles in subsequent renovations. As for the 2,000-gallon underground oil tank that passed inspection prior to the sale, but 2 months after the sale, when our insurance company canceled us because we had a 2,000-gallon underground oil tank and no insurance company would cover us unless we dug it up, that tank was found to have huge holes in its bottom. The Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management thus facilitated our initial meeting with our new neighbor. We knew none of this yet. All we knew was that we had ourselves a project. The day we closed on the new house, remarkably around the same time as the tidal wave reverberations of the loud pop of the 2008 real estate bubble, we applied for and got a building permit to renovate the kitchen. We arrived at our new house with wonder bars and hammers. That day, we took out the wall between the kitchen and the dining living room. Thereby began a whole house renovation. Activity is an excellent way to avoid thinking about consequences or feeling teutonic shifts of change at a primal level. Providence held my identity. It was Goldilocks just right for me. Not too big, not too small, walking, not driving. Familiar places and faces that I had seen in passing for over 2 decades. That kind of familiarity creates a web beneath one, a support and coziness. After we bought the Edgewood house, Carl and I told ourselves we would still live in Providence. Our new address proved it. The house was in Providence because the city had bought all the property surrounding Roger Williams Park in order to control what was done on its edges. But as we drove back and forth, Providence to Edgewood, every morning and night to work on the new house, we tended to be rather quiet. And every so often, especially when we got stuck in traffic, I would look over at Carl and say some rendition of, "Is this a big mistake?" Too often, he would look as worried as I felt. But then the traffic would start to move, and likely as not, we were late to meet an electrician or plumber or friends over for dinner. Walls came down, kitchen cabinets, knob and tube wiring, and old plumbing were ripped out, and so too my heart. I was deep in the mire of not wanting to move from Angel Street, never mind renovate a house in Edgewood. I wanted to stay in our Angel Street home with its subtle sesame and sage gray walls, peace and stillness. My childhood cognitive dissonance was back and in full throttle. "This is entirely wrong. I don't want to be doing this. I want to go back." Opposed, I made the choice, time to deal with the consequences. And stop weeping. Some people are homeless. You have 2 roofs over your head. What have you to complain about? The renovations proceeded. So did the preparations for selling the Angel Street house. I busied myself reverse acquisitioning. Books, clothes, kitchen paraphernalia. Let it all go. Carl, in the meantime, packed paper clips and rubber bands, his collection of trombone and wooden boat magazines, 20 years into our marriage, I discovered that he is a true waste not, want not Yankee, but who had time to contemplate this? Too many balls in the air, yet we carried on. Our life was a NASCAR race, and we were the drivers in control in our seat of the pants way. We had a plan, a 2-for-1 deal. According to our modus operandi, that meant hiring another architect to draw up plans for a New Hampshire house at the same time as we renovated the Edgewood house. The year 2011 consisted of a lot of plaster dust in Edgewood, low-grade panic because the Angel House wasn't selling, and weekly drives to New Hampshire to meet with said architect, who, in February of 2012, presented us with the final building documents of the New Hampshire cabin, the fruition of our enormous carbon footprint and his massaging of numbers. How did we feel? Disappointed. Those plans didn't include our bigger than us ideas. No big windows oriented to the south for passive heating, no radiant heated floors. And what of the greenhouse? We had hoped to grow greens in the winter, my tendency to bury seeds notwithstanding. The greenhouse would have been connected to gray water sewage treatment ponds that would have also served as rainwater catchments from the roof to the water of the gardens, with all of it connected to a chicken coop somehow. We didn't know how, but they weren't in the house plans, those dreams of ours. Everything would be part of a whole, each aspect fitting into the others, a microcosm of that delicate and precious balance, life. And then we showed our builder the plans, a noble baloney kind of guy, known for his Yosemite Sam temperament and Energizer bunny work ethic. He took one look at the plans and scoffed. You can't afford this. It's 3 times your budget. Over beers, we discussed our options. Our builder suggested we put up a timber frame house. Simple. 2.5 months later, he was cutting timbers for that 24 by 38 foot structure. On April 20th, 2012, our foundation was poured. April 24th, the deck was put on the foundation. The timbers were framed up and ready to go. May 1st would be the barn raising of the structure that would be our weekend cabin. The night before, Carl and I stayed at Friends B&B in Dublin, New Hampshire. Rising early the next morning, we arrived at Darwin's View at 7:30. Tim and his crew were already there, appropriately dressed in all-weather gear. Carl and I, dressed in sneakers and jeans, wondered what we could have been thinking. Darwin's View and Mount Monadnock had a history of tossing foul weather at us whenever we had parties and campouts. What else but drizzle, rain, and mid-40s temperatures could we have expected? Black flies. It was May and there was not one in sight. And miraculously, no wind. Carl might have been purple with cold by the end of the morning, but the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Our 12-year-old niece Peyton huddled next to me under an umbrella. We watched the second bay of timber rise up in the air, floating through the skies and down, fitting perfectly into the holes in the floor. She looked up at me and smiled her snaggletooth smile. I didn't think this would ever happen. And neither did I, trust me. So around the same time, I decided that I wanted to eat eggs not laid in morally questionable conditions. Thus, we adopted our 6 girl chicks, one of whom turned out to be a boy, Big Red. He was not allowed in Providence, according to city rules. And so in December of 2012, we moved the chickens and ourselves up to that newly built off-grid cabin at Darwin's View, just for the winter. That first week at Darwin's View, our attempt to create a home had a 1 step forward, 2 steps back feel to it. Likely as not due to the site work being done outside. A case of the contractor's 2 weeks pushing a September project into late November. With all the disorder and noise of the excavator at work, we had to be sure that Big Red and his hens didn't get lost or buried. Thus, we put them up next to the house in their tunneled chicken tractor. Made of white PVC tubing and chicken wire and covered with a brown tarp, the chicken tractor kept Big Red and the girls safe and in one place, even if they didn't understand that it was in their best interest. Panda clucked nervous reassurances. Culottes moaned her sky is falling worries. And the other girls fluffed and scratched about, on occasion raising their heads to look at their strange and moving surroundings. They looked at me querulously. It's breezy, they seemed to say. Is there no way to stop our walls and ceilings from flapping so alarmingly? I looked for a rock that wasn't frozen to the ground to hold down the tarp, leaving the girls to hop up into the nearly finished coop with Carl. He crouched in the plywood box that measured 7 by 5 feet, 3 feet high at one end and 2 feet at the other. Screwing in the nesting boxes and the roost, he had Ping at one shoulder, watching and advising. Chipper and Culottes judging the space from the distance, while Panda and Lola hopped onto the roost to make sure it was positioned at a suitable height. Much negotiation back and forth, with Culottes tisking and Panda and Lola cackling and scratching. Carl sat back on his heels, removed the screws and clamped in his mouth, and looked at me. Could you please keep them occupied? I'm trying to get something done here. Just in time, a roar and rumble from that large yellow dinosaur in the yard, so naked of feathers and emitting stench and noise. Big Red crowed his challenge. The girls hopped out of the coop and ran the length of the run to watch this new and exciting life event, the Excavator. Whereas the chickens were currently on tier 1, near the house, the Excavator was on tier 2, 30 feet from the house and lower down by 4 feet. It sat in one place, but its arm would swing alarmingly close to the chickens' run, pushing piles of dirt toward them and then taking it away. Or it would pluck a huge rock out of the ground and lift it up, swooping it past as easily as a balloon. Wide-eyed, the chickens and I watched as the excavator leveled dirt, pushed boulders, and built stone walls. And it is fascinating to watch the power of such a massive machine. The girls and I were transfixed as it accomplished what would have taken 4 bare hands months to do. Big Red, as young boys will, scoffed. He challenged that yellow monster, especially when the arm of the excavator swung around and his beak was not a foot from the shovel that was 5 times his size and made of metal, not flesh and blood. Big Red, undaunted, scolded the shovel, marching past it and back again, pacing his line in the sand. He glared at me, making it clear he did not approve. This living situation was insecure at best, he crowed. I assured him that soon their home would expand to include a cozy coop with nesting boxes. I pointed again to Carl, who, in a work jacket and with frozen hands and runny nose, was hard at work, crouched in the coop that was built for chickens, not humans. This sizing issue was something that we would come to consider over the years. But for now, look, I said, Carl's tweaking your new home. It's almost done. While Carl finished up the coop outside in the frigid cold, I organized and cleaned the inside of the nice warm house. By week's end, we had things relatively under control. That Saturday morning, there was no giant Tonka toy outside to distract us. The coop was connected to the run and covered with hay bales and had been duly dubbed the Hay Chalet. I made our morning cafe lattes while Carl fried up 4 eggs, still not our happy eggs, but we were getting closer to that every day. Toasted 2 slices of bread and blended up a fruit shake. Over breakfast, we assessed what a huge amount of energy we had used to make breakfast. Espresso machine, toaster oven, blender. A perfect storm that had caused the generator to start up. How joyous to have that backup. But yet, weren't we supposed to stay within the limits of our solar-powered batteries? We contemplated that dilemma on that gray morning. Mount Monadnock lay hidden in a white and gray veil, a snow shower that we watched approach. Nora curled herself into a smaller-than-she cardboard box. Nick sprawled on the couch. A fire blazed in the wood-burning stove, warming the 1,500 square foot house to the 1,500 square feet of the house to a balmy 75 degrees to counter the outside cold. Carl noted we'd have to experiment, balance the tightness of the house envelope with the munificence of the stove. In the meantime, dressed in t-shirts and pajama bottoms, we breathed in the perfection of that off-grid moment. So I use the theme of home today because our collective home is under such assault. I don't think I'm alone in believing that these times these are times of deep mourning of what's been lost. This year we've lost both of our cats, Nick and Nora, after 17 years, and 9 chickens, and life goes on. My quest for home, meantime, has morphed into a determination to somehow save it. I believe humans are here to experience and steward the world. We all trip up. Certainly Carl and I have, as you will read, but believe me when I say we don't give up. We join together and try again and again and again. So I'll end with this lesson that I've learned from the chickens, and that is this. The sky might be falling, but there is always hope for more mealyworms and the possibility of an egg to celebrate. In other words, however starry-eyed this might sound, as we all go forward in these very dark and scary times, let's embrace hope and compassion. So that's sort of my presentation for tonight. And thank you.
That was great.
And, answer any questions or?
Yeah, if anybody has questions, you can either raise your hand and I'll turn your microphone on, or if you are shy about that, you can just type your questions on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can either toss your questions in now, or we can wait till the end. That was interesting to hear, because I think it's something that a lot of us can relate to, what we consider home and how hard it is to leave a home that you've established. Having renovated a home, my home one time, I can completely understand how it's the snowball effect, where you get one thing done and then, well, now we have to do this because this looks old and this is new. And then I'll use the example of our bookstore. We had to completely renovate it when we before we could move in and get all the books in. And I was finding that to be a bit like childbirth, where you forget all the pain and suffering you went through. And then now it's time for us to renovate our second floor. And at first I was all gung-ho, let's do this. And now that we're several weeks into it, I'm like, oh, I remember how that sucked last time. So I think a lot of us go through that too. So it was nice to hear about your journey. Anara has a question. Why do you call your place Darwin's View?
It was basically the adventures that we had, getting a building permit, getting the driveway up here, and creating the place was a survival of the fittest kind of experience. Most people would have just run in the other direction. And so it was just, that's why it just seemed like an appropriate thing. And because we have a 300-degree view, we have a full-on view of Mount Monadnock, Massachusetts border, and Wapak Trail. So it's a fabulous view, and it took it out of us to get up here, and continues to do so. Lots of wind up here.
Oh, really?
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Anara also wants to know how many chickens you have now.
Currently, we lost one last week, so it's 16. We have 12 older ones, and we have 4 babies. We had a hawk last week take out one of our little ones, which was very sad. But everybody seems to be carrying on without her. Yeah. And then we have our oldest one, actually is the only one left who is in the book. It's Apricot. She's one of our cream light bars, and she's 4 now, I think. Something like that.
Okay. We could probably start in with Carl asking you some questions too, and then I'll continue to monitor the audience questions and toss them out to you as they come.
Okay.
All right, Carl.
You know.
Well, the question I had some questions written down, but
I hid them.
Tory took them, so I don't know what happened.
I can't find them anyway.
So I'm going to try and remember. But I know one of them was how has living off grid changed the way you live your life?
Okay, I think one of the stories, there's an attitude that is required living off grid, that some ebbs and flows. There is no perfect, but what the story that I wrote once on the blog was, at one point we bought a Leaf, the car. It was an all-electric vehicle just as they came out, and you get into an electric vehicle And it's this completely counterintuitive way. First of all, you just drive by all the gas stations because you've got you're run by electricity. But you have to be very aware of it. With that particular car, it had 100 miles. And it was 100 miles to get to your destination and back again.
Wow.
And if you didn't account for that back again on a flat surface at a 70-degree day in perfect conditions, you could go into what's called turtle mode. And turtle mode is when it slows way down and tells you you have this much to your destination, you're not going to make it. So we did experience that a couple of times, but I know that I've been very sloppy about it lately, but when I hit the reset button, it's very much, it's a cloudy day, you can't have that second cup of coffee. And you have to be more aware of where Carl is constantly checking. We only have electric vehicles except for the truck, which bakes out for everything we might do otherwise. And so we're just need to find, do we do laundry or do we charge the car? Do we, vacuum or whatever? So it's a lot of juggling around and awareness of those energy things. How about you? What have you changed? Anyway.
Oh, this is about you.
Yeah, it's about me. Okay.
I have a friend who sort of recently, it's only been a few months, she and her husband purchased a piece of property up in Washington State. And they're in the process of really living off the grid like you guys are. And they went from city living in suburbia, but she didn't go cold turkey into this, is my understanding, that she it's more like what she's doing now is that she now has chickens, and they're getting animals. They recently purchased some, I forget what breed of dogs they were, to keep the chickens safe. She has a network of people who also are living sustainably like you are, and they do trade of products. So like she can get milk from, a neighbor down the street and trade for, whatever. Do you guys do anything like that, or are you solely on your own?
We're still quite connected to the grocery stores, although we're getting better about it. Go ahead.
One of the motivators to creating this was when we met our neighbors here, 600,000 feet down the hill through the woods, but they have been living off grid for the last 30 years. 40 years, yeah. And they brought up all their kids, and they've lived on total minimalist power system for a long time, and we saw the way they were doing it, and it was an inspiration to us. And so, and our relationship with them has been wonderful throughout, and they are always offering us advice and a lot of, they do a lot of their own canning and food production. So they're always bringing us produce or canned stuff, or just try this. Have you ever had one of these things before? Kohlrabi? What the heck is kohlrabi? What do you do with that? But they're fabulous. So
have you guys taken advantage of technology in that there are various Facebook groups that you can join who are also living sustainably, so that you can learn from what they're doing? I mean, I joined a gardening group because for the first time in my life, I have a very small raised garden in the back of our house. So I'm so brand new to that. And I joined a Facebook Sacramento gardening group, and I've learned so much just from the people who have been doing this a lot longer. So did you guys join anything, or are you just winging it the whole way through?
This is something for me that I've been thinking about. We wing it, but at the beginning, I remember I was trying to figure out if I wanted to make a business out of my blog. And I talked to a woman who said, you know, you just need to get out and meet people. And looking back over these years, we've gone to NOFA, Northeast Farmers Association. We've gone to all kinds of conferences, and the people we know now are farmers, people who work with biochar, who are biodynamic farmers. We have just, you know, composters. And so we haven't per se joined groups online. We have very much we are part of a community that is huge.
Yeah, it sort of developed through farmers markets. I'm sure you guys must have a fabulous farmers market in Sacramento.
Yeah.
We have a little farmers market here. It's kind of sketchy. It was, you know, but it, you know, there are farmers that travel from farmers market to farmers market, and they all interact and they bring different products and different wisdom and all sorts of things. So the farmers market has been, although we haven't been in a while because we have a farm share and it takes forever to get to the farmers market, and it's only, so we're not always getting to it when we should, but that has been, in the past, has been a great place, a resource and a community development place.
So as far as sustainability goes with your food intake, you mentioned that you guys haven't completely weaned from the grocery store. About what percentage, because this just fascinates me, what percentage do you think that you're living completely on your own versus being still connected to the grocery store?
Well,
that's a good one.
I do a lot of baking, so there's certain things that, you know, there's the sugar, there's the flour, although Carl is determined to grow wheat. We have potatoes that will get us through the year. We have a lot of potatoes. We're so thrilled. Tomatoes, we have plenty of. This was a weird year. So we're still learning this process of growing food and figuring out the processing and storage thing. I always get overwhelmed by it. So we're still, I don't even know what percentage it would be, but we are very much, we have a lemon tree, an orange tree, and a key lime pie, and trust me, they have not had fruit yet. So we buy, you know, there's a lot of things that we're still in the habit of.
Yeah.
But especially in these times, we're tweaking it constantly.
Yeah, you know, it's like, do you kid yourself into thinking you're going to produce your own bananas? It's not going to happen, you know. So, you know, there are certain things we're going to always have to go to, but we try to choose the right grocery store, one that's, you know, that meets our ethical standard, and we stay in there and support them and try to be as conscientious with all of our food as we can, as what's reasonable.
And that's something that, going back to our neighbors, the Landises, who are in the book, Q said at one point, we were having dinner, this is a few years ago, and I was like, yeah, but, you know, organic food is sort of expensive. He's like, no. To eat healthy food and organic food and sustainably raised food is much less expensive in the long run. And I think that's something that we as a culture need to learn, that we need to include the externalities of how much it really costs when I'm not going to come up with an idea, but you know, with fossil fuels, for instance, the costs of the decimation to our ecology and our environment, if those are included, as well as the oil spill costs, as well as the health costs to, you know, if those were all included, solar and wind would be nothing comparatively. So we really need to, and again, that goes back to the whole attitude of, we need to create we cannot go back. The changes that have happened, not just in the last 4 years, but in the last decades, we need to change so much, and it's scary and it's hard, and we are imperfect, and we are not.
It's also such a large I mean, as a society, for the most part, I mean, being in lockdown because of COVID, to me, that feels like I'm almost living sustainably, because I can't go to the grocery store as much as I would like. Hardly living sustainably, but we've all had to alter our lives because of COVID. But one thing I was wondering is that as a new gardener myself, and because most of us are so used to just going to the grocery store for what we need, I have found that it's a giant learning curve. It's not just put the seed in the ground. Like I really was trying to grow vegetables from seed. I wanted that experience, and I thought I was doing everything right. And then I would get them into the planter box from their little seed starter thing. And then something ate them all as they were coming up. And then I'm like, oh, it's so much easier to go to the grocery store. But it's fun for me because I go out and I relax, and I only have one, fairly decent sized raised garden, but I'm always out there tending to it. And I feel connected to the food that I eat. And Anara, who's on here, she actually works for the bookstore, and we share what our garden grows. So she had a better tomato crop this year than I did. So she gave me tomatoes. I ended up getting figs from down the street because she had an abundance. So I was making fig jam till it's coming out of my ears. But
We've had
I do have a fig tree, but he's just a baby. And
yeah.
I did get figs off of him, which I didn't think I would this early, because I only planted him last summer. But the woman who lives down the street from us, who also has chickens, she has an abundance of figs that she has more than she needs. So I'm just taking them by the bagfuls and making something with them and selling the jam at the bookstore and everything. But
Right.
I think that it's important for people to become more connected to where their food comes from, and
Absolutely.
that process. And Anara wants to know, she typed a question here. She wants to know if you're also vegetarian as part of your Treasure the Earth lifestyle.
I stopped eating land meat when I was 16. I believe that all animals are sentient, and I couldn't kill them. That was a tough week last week when we had to end the suffering of a little chicken. So I have not eaten land meat since I was 17. I gave up fish in 2013 after reading Eating Animals, Jonathan Sawyer's book. And so I am a vegetarian. I do eat milk and eggs and dairy products and stuff, which I'm currently having a conversation with myself about. So it is those haven't, I don't, I understand people who want to eat meat, but I do think that there are choices in our food system that we can make that make it's better for the animals.
I eat meat.
Yeah.
But at home I don't often, because I'll go long times without eating any meat because we just don't. She's not going to prepare it. I don't want to just prepare it for myself. So unless someone comes over that's a meat eater and I feel like treating them to something, then I might do it. But then comes the choice of where do I get that meat and how was it raised, and knowing
and that's when we go to the farm.
Knowing the whole history, it's Portlandia all over again. But it really is. It's a better system. It feels better. You feel better. I think the food is much better. Especially meats. I think meats are so much better when they're healthily raised and they live a happy life.
Well, early on I was probably like midsummer when my eggplant had produced one little tiny eggplant. And my husband doesn't care for eggplant, but I said, you're going to eat this because I grew it. And so I found a recipe that said it doesn't make it slimy, which is what he hates. So I did that, and I cut it into little matchbook slices. And if you've ever seen those videos going around of the little hamsters, the guy like makes the little table for them and the little food, and they're just like, that's what I think. I was so proud of my eggplant because I had grown it, and I appreciated it, and it's different than when you go to the grocery store. And you guys mentioned farmers markets, that's even a next level connecting yourself to the product.
Right.
That you're meeting the farmers, and back before we had the bookstore and practically live there now, we would go to a local farmers market, and as you can imagine, Sacramento is a huge farm to fork environment, and so we had a specific rancher that we would go to who he was always there, and he raised pigs. And so we got to a nice relationship with him, where my husband could email him and say, I'm looking for this type of meat. If you can have it at the Sunday farmers market on X day, I'll be there to get it. And so even that felt nice. Like we were connecting with people and not just going to the grocery store and not knowing where your food is coming from.
Yeah. And it's also important because I think there's a lot of transitions with small farmers. I mean, it's frightening how our farmland is disappearing, and it's being bought up at retailers and investors' prices. And once it's gone, it's a lot. If there's buildings and pavement on it, especially, it's gone. And we're currently on the board of Land for Good, which is Farmland Trust, both of which are involved in sort of supporting farmers. We need to support the farmers in the same way we need to support our local bookstores. It's the smaller is better. There's just no doubt, because I lost my train of thought, but the supporting our farmers around here too, they're struggling, and it's not, I mean, we sort of are, if our eggplant crop fails, or if our tomato crop fails, we can go to the grocery store. Farmers, that's how they live. And I always think back to, when people there was no grocery store. So it's,
that you can tech your way out of problems, as we destroy the farmland. The chemical companies keep coming up with more chemicals to make the food grow somehow.
Yeah.
And it's just scary and unhealthy, and it creates more problems that, end up with.
I come from a long line of farmers in Kansas, my father's family, and I learned to drive a combine at a young age, and my parents moved to Oregon before I was born. That's where they met, but my father moved there, my mom already lived there. But I remember one summer many years ago, we were at a family wedding, and one of my cousins, who is still a farmer in Kansas, got into a heated discussion with my husband about GMO, and that he had at that time chosen to use GMOs on his crops so that he could get the most out of them. So it's interesting to hear the arguments for both sides of that. And it's certainly a hot topic.
Yeah. It's funny. I just realized I started a book a while ago about that, Mendel's Kitchen, I think it was, Gregor Mendel. Anyway, but there's pros and cons to it, and we're always, there's I don't know.
Yeah, there's degrees of everything, and you have to find your acceptable level, and that's where you go. but we sort of know, I've got a book that I've just started called Natural, and it's sort of picking apart the natural, the faith we put in natural. If something is natural, like natural childbirth, that's supposed to be, the best. But we have a medical knowledge now that can help with those situations and make it, a little less dangerous. But so there are balances of, of what works and what doesn't, and it's finding those. But each person is an individual and unique in their choice of what works for them. So yeah, it's hard to say whether the big farms are going to be the answer, or small farms are going to be the answer. But I think we should be those of us who want small farms should be working very hard to make them at least be able to compete on a certain level.
Right.
So it's not some elitist type of opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the shop local mentality that we're really lucky in Sacramento, which is a very, large city compared to a lot of them in California. But we're lucky that we have a really strong shop local movement here and mentality that, I connect with other bookstore owners across the country, and so many of them write about how hard it is to fight Amazon with their community, and that people just automatically think, oh, I'll just order this book from Amazon, or I'll order whatever from Amazon. And we have, for the most part, quite the opposite happening here in Sacramento, that we kind of fought that battle and then got on top of it. But, we have people who come in and are saying, we want to buy a book from you guys because we don't buy anything from Amazon, or we don't buy our books from Amazon. But I mean, it even goes down to, like there's a local spice shop that's right down the street from our bookstore. And people go there to buy their spices instead of the grocery store. But then you have little businesses like that. When we've had two of them go out just because of COVID, that it's really hard for, there's only a few of us who are making it during COVID. And the odd thing is that once they announce that they're closing, then people are all like, oh my God, you can't close. I love you guys. And you've got the line down the street. And there's a mom and pop little restaurant, kind of a Hofbrau kind of thing that's just across the street from us. And they've been in business for like 30 years there. And just we can't survive from COVID, and they've had lines down the block because their last day is next week, and I was like, well, where were you people when they needed you? And I think that Sacramento still has a little bit to learn about that it's a commitment that, I try to instill that into our customers over social media, that every once in a while I'll say, pick 3 places this week that you can commit that you are going to support a local business and go buy from them. Ross and I worked many years ago with a woman who was spearheading the shop local movement in California, and she was backed by American Express, and so we got to know her, and her program was called the 350 Project, and it was pick 3 businesses and spend $50 at each of them that month. And that was years ago. That really got people's thinking on how to buy local. And so it's an interesting process to switch people's minds into thinking that way.
And it's also, I'm just realizing today, I ordered from Staples and I didn't support Steele's. And now I have to return that thing from Steele's and go to Steele's and get the same thing through Steele's.
Yeah.
So it's just thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Ross and I are innocent. We order a fair share of things from Amazon that we just, because of time.
Right.
That
And availability.
literally are at the bookstore all the time, and we don't have time to go out and source,
Right.
printer paper or, but I think I try to make up for it. A good example is my husband's son is getting married next weekend. And I asked them several weeks ago, where is your wedding registry? And my stepson said, well, Megan did it on Amazon. And I was like, what are you doing? We have so many stores around here that are not Amazon. And so I just said, I don't care what she put on that list. I'm getting what I want from the local stores. And I did end up ordering the container on Amazon because I knew that it came from India, and he just happened to be selling it on Amazon. So I bought it from him through Amazon. Cool. But the spices that are going in there are coming from the All Spicery, and other kitchen-y kind of stuff is coming from a small shop in town called the Kitchen Table. So we all have to think that way, that you have to support the local people.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Like we're in a small town here, and they're always talking about how we need to bring businesses into town, and because we're an hour and a half from Boston, or 2 hours from Boston, and it's a kind of a community that's lost a lot of youth over the years because people go to big towns, big cities.
Right.
And they don't the equation or the gears aren't turning the way they say, we need to bring businesses here, but you need to shop here.
Right.
In order, the people that live here need to say, I'm not going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to go to the hardware store in town here. Or I'm not going to go on, flowers.com. I'm going to buy from the florist here in town. Right. And, make a point of doing that because it builds your local economy. Right. And then you don't have to work like tax base and all this stuff, because it all feeds into itself when you start shopping.
Something that's been happening on our block that the bookstore is on is that we're in an area that has a lot of bars and clubs and food establishments, so restaurants. But during COVID, all of those had to close. And some of them tried doing the takeout thing. And because we're on a street that has the light rail train that goes by, we weren't able to close down and build out the restaurants for outside dining because of the train. So they couldn't just kind of go in the street like they can in other areas in Sacramento. But so the bookstore's kind of an anchor right now for that block, because everything is not only closed, but they boarded up because of the riots that had happened here. But one thing we noticed is that this past week, a restaurant that had started renovating their space just as COVID started, they decided to open last week. And it was amazing how much business their opening brought to our bookstore, because you had people coming for them because they were a popular food truck to begin with, and now they have a brick and mortar store. But they would stop and get their chicken there, and then they would walk by and say, oh, there's a bookstore here. Yep. And how each one of us on the block supports each other by sending more customers to the other stores. And when so many are closed or boarded up, it's hard to keep going. And it's so important to network, you know, like we sell cookbooks in the store, obviously, and we tell people, hey, walk down to the Allspicery to get the spices that you need from this. Or if we see that somebody has purchased a cocktail book, there's a store that's right next to Allspicery called The Good Bottle, and they sell really nice liquor. And so we say, go over there and get your stuff. Don't go to, you know, the grocery store or, you know, any of the liquor stores. I mean, although a lot of liquor stores are very small run, but it just goes to that you have to network and you have to refer customers to each other. And it works. I mean, we even do it with a bookstore that isn't even all that close to us. They're many blocks away, probably at least a mile away, but we refer customers to them all the time. If we can't get a book, or if somebody wants a used book, because we don't sell used, we'll say, hey, go down to Beer's bookstore. And they send people to us. And it's just, it's not a competition. It's supporting each other. And it's a nice community. So Anara has one more question for Tory. She says, since you don't eat chicken, what do you do with all the eggs that result from 16 plus chickens?
I eat the eggs, and we currently have a full house because we have my mother and my sister living with us due to COVID, and my mother has Parkinson's, so we have aides coming in and out. So we go through eggs. And the chickens, we're going to be slowly, if not for the bobcats and the hawks, we'd have about 42 chickens right now, and it would be an old hen farm. So even when when a bobcat took out 4 of our chickens earlier this year, and we bury them. We have a chicken graveyard. So does that answer your question? It's okay, because they're very cute.
Yeah. The friend that I was talking about earlier, who lives in Washington, she said when they bought their place, it also came with chickens, but they were very sickly and they weren't free range. They were kept in a relatively small area. But the first thing she did when they moved in was to let them out and let them roam around. And she's big on feeding her animals and her family very natural things. And so she was custom mixing their food and all that. And she was sharing on Facebook the photos of how the chickens looked when they first arrived versus just a couple weeks later. Was amazing to see the difference. And that they were happy because they were out roaming around. But you know, they did have problems with maybe a coyote, or I don't know what they have in Washington, but it got one of the chickens. And she has really small children, and this animal had gotten one of the chickens, and Andrea tried to do everything she could to save this chicken, and it just wasn't going to happen. And so she turned it into a lesson for her children that this is sometimes what happens, and sometimes having to end an animal's life is the best thing you can do for it.
Kind of
but she's getting used to that too, because like I said, she comes from city living. She volunteered on farms, so she's not 100% new to that, but it was her first time having to kill an animal because it was suffering, and she said it really bothered her, but she knew that she was doing the right thing.
And that's basically how it is. I mean, we were talking about this last week because we had to use a hatchet.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, and it's, whereas a couple of times before we had an egg-bound hen, and we had a farmer friend of ours come by and make sure that she wasn't savable, and he said, you need to take care of this. And he had a very gentle, kind, just sort of and I want to learn how to do that. I don't want to, but because it's in the same way we want to give them happy and healthy lives, we want to give them easy, smooth deaths. And I'm learning that's something that they're teaching me now, is that I need to learn how to do that, so that or I need Carl to learn how to do that.
So it's inevitable, and there are better ways. There are ways that are better than other ways. So yeah.
A few years ago, I had watched a documentary on, I believe it was Netflix, about a couple from downtown New York living in a tiny little apartment, decided they wanted to purchase land in upstate New York and become sustainable. And so they made a documentary about it. And they had hired somebody who was very knowledgeable in that one section of land would sustain the next section, and how it's all connected. And so they had to, somebody's saying biggest little farm. Yes, yep. Is it. That made me, it made me want to maybe think about doing something like that, but it also talked about the reality of it, that it's nothing that you have to, that you can just jump into, and you have to really learn how to do it and learn about the land. Is that something that you guys had to go through?
We're still going through. It's a constant learning curve. And one thing that really struck me in that film was they definitely had they had good funding. They did. With the biodynamic guy, whose name I'm going to block out, but the one who they hired to help them do that. The whole the biodynamic sprays and that whole system of, I mean, we've attempted that on a very basic level.
The permaculture design thing of setting everything up so there's what runs down this hill feeds that, and the pests that go to this will be taken care of by the other pests that come from this, and using wasps, and I mean, it's just incredible that the amount of information you have to know. And
and then when the professional goes away, or the guy who knows it, the expert goes away, then you're learning it on your own. And it's all a process, and we've got a long ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress, but there's always something. And the beauty of it, though, is that nature does, if you give her a chance, who is it who says, if you just stop killing her, she'll heal. And that's what we all need to start doing, is just sort of stepping back, reconnect to the land, get our hands into the soil, get our children learning about it, accepting the change that is happening. And it's, and it's easy, and it can happen in the city as well as the country. Little bits here and there. If everybody, I always think if everybody, when we turn the shower on, we have our little milk jugs and we hold it up to the shower and fill it up until it's warm. And then we put the jug down. So that's half a gallon every shower that we take. And in a year, that's 300 or whatever gallons it would be. And if everybody did that, 340 million Americans, I mean, in a perfect world, so it's just every little step, and it matters, our choices. And it's exciting because that gives us a little bit of control in this crazy, uncontrollable world.
I wonder if we're going to start seeing a lot of changes in people just because of having to be home a lot more due to COVID. I mean, we are seeing it even at the bookstore, because the baking books, like the bread books, we can't keep them up on the shelf.
Yeah.
I can't find bread flour at the store anymore. When I do, I'm like, I'm getting it. And so many people, I have loved seeing my friends posting their photos of all the different things that they're making that they have never made before. The sourdough starter craze. And it's amazing to see people learning how to do all of this stuff and then sharing it. Like they're so proud, that they're doing all of this. And we might not even be close to living sustainably like you and Carl are, but I joked with my husband when COVID had started that I kind of feel like I'm camping because everything changed and we can't get toilet paper and what are we going to do? I can't get flour. I can't get sugar, and it kind of opened our eyes as to, what if society suddenly becomes like a science fiction film that we have to how to survive and to grow our own food. And I'm kind of hoping that the outcome of COVID, I think there are a lot of good things that are coming out of COVID. It's not all bad. And people are learning to connect with the earth more and with their families more. And that I hope that when COVID is done and over, that people will still embrace that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think there's so much good about it that it's inevitable that we'll take a lot of good stuff out of this.
I hope so. Yeah. So I don't have any other questions. Anara posted the link for purchasing the book. So thank you guys very much. This was, this has been a really fun conversation for me personally, because it's something that I'm really interested in, and to actually get to talk to people who are doing it is really exciting for me. So thank you for doing this. I will pull the recording off of here and it'll be posted up on YouTube and also on our website. So I will let people know who couldn't join us, who wanted to, that they can watch it.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
All right. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Okay, you too.
All right. And that's the book. And Anara posted the link. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye.